Hello, everyone, and welcome to KETIV's Autodesk Virtual Academy. We do look a little odd today. Hopefully, you guys can all hear me. Happy Halloween to everyone, because we're not going to have AVA on Halloween this year like we did last year. But for those of you who don't know, I'm the one talking right here, Daniel Hwang with KETIV Technologies. I'm my normal self here. I'm just wearing this llama hat. But anyways, yeah, welcome. Today we're going to have a great session today on 3ds Max, which is one of the primary renderers here for the Autodesk suite of software. And next to me, I have Daniel. Daniel here is one of our engineers on our team here, and Daniel is pretty well versed in Max, so he's one of the perfect candidates to be able to show you all Max today.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. Yeah, like Nigel was saying, we're going to be going over Max today. Very shortly, our goals are going to be to set it up Max for just quick renders for you guys who use Inventor and other CAD software. We want to be able to import that right into Max and set it up quickly and easily, efficiently for renderings, so that you guys get a really crisp image, something that looks a little bit more realistic than what an Inventor rendering would get you. Not only that, but we also know that a lot of you guys used Showcase in the past, and that was really easy to use. I want to kind of get rid of the stigma from 3ds Max. I know it's a really big program, but it's also pretty easy to use as long as you get familiar with it and more comfortable with it. So yeah, we're just going to get a little bit more familiar with the Max tools today, and particularly the tools necessary for a quick setup. Nothing too crazy, but just so you guys get started and so you guys can be comfortable, so that you guys can play around with it yourselves.
Definitely. I know Max from like when I first looked at Max, I was like, wow, this is super overwhelming. There's like infinite buttons on here. How could I possibly get started, or where do I even get started? And hopefully we can answer those questions for you today. For those of you who do open Max and just don't know where to start, there's so many different buttons, so many different options, and hopefully we answer those questions today. Me personally, I've done some product photography in the past for people in industry, not necessarily the manufacturing industry, but for products nonetheless. And stuff like that is very cumbersome, and sometimes it's very expensive when you have to hire a photographer to come on site, set up all of their lights. Maybe depending on how large your product is, you might have to rent a space to put it in too. And to be able to get those realistic images can sometimes cost thousands of dollars. Or not realistic, those real life images can cost thousands of dollars. Whereas something like Max, someone like Daniel can go ahead and put your actual CAD model in there, set it up, and then get a relatively realistic image in a couple of minutes. If you want to get to like that next level of photo quality, or I guess image quality, it will take a little bit longer, seeing as you need to use a lot more computing power to be able to do that. But it's completely reasonable within the amount of time to do so.
Yeah, you also have to consider the amount of hardware you don't need for 3ds Max. You don't need any cameras or lights or background or anything like that. You just need the program. And so it's very simple. Hopefully you'll see how simple it is. Again, we're not going to be focusing too much on the details of setting up like full-on environments like rooms and outside trees and things like that. We're just going to be focusing on simple CAD data, bringing that in and setting it up for like a photo. Right?
Exactly,
like
exactly.
Virtual studio almost. And so this is really for you guys who use a lot of CAD and you guys want to take that to the next level, to show your customers exactly what your product looks like before you give them like an actual physical copy. You can just send them a photo that you guys rendered up. So let me just get into the demo right now. For you guys, we're going to switch over to 3ds Max. I already have it open. I'm using 3ds Max 2018. As you can see, it's already very different from what you might be used to in AutoCAD or Inventor, but I'm going to go very slowly. Hopefully you guys can follow along, and if not, we'll always have that video for you guys afterwards that you guys can go back to and take a look at. So from the get-go, you're going to see the interface. This is going to be where your model is placed. There's 4 screens, and that's for a very specific reason. We get the top view, front view, left view, and a perspective view all at once. They're connected so that you can move in one, and it'll actually affect the model in the others. So like if you move a model in the top view, it's going to move it up and down in the front view, or left and right in the left view, or things like that. So this is like the X, Y plane, whereas this is the X, Z plane, and this is the YZ plane. So you get all three planes. You can look at it all sides of your model, and then you also get the perspective view so that you can kind of see from bird's eye view what exactly is going on. By default, these are set to wireframe, but you can go ahead and change that to whatever you need. And yeah, and so the left side, it's going to be your layers. It's like your scene selector. It's it's like your model tree. It's going to be on the left side, and you're going to be browsing through there. And then on the right side, it's going to be your tools and your toolbars, pretty much. So you can create things, modify things, and you get a lot of different tools here, utilities to mess with and manipulate your environment. So we're gonna start here actually by importing a model. That's where we're gonna first start. So if you guys follow me over to the File tab, or the File menu, in the top left, we're gonna import. And then this import option, it's gonna import any non-Max file. So CAD data or pretty much CAD data. And so we're gonna go and I'm gonna browse to where I have an Inventor model already saved. I got it from the Inventor sample files. You can always find that online. And I'm just gonna open up a very small assembly. It's a flywheel assembly. It's very, very small. It's gonna ask you what the options you want for that. I usually leave it as default. I want a body object. I don't want really meshes. And I want it to be, yeah, completely replacing that scene. Right, so it comes in as you would expect. It's very like a one-to-one. Whatever I had in Inventor, it's gonna bring it in. On the left-hand side, you'll see it even kept some of the hierarchy, where it's like flywheel assembly file, and then it has like these parts in it, and it's all grouped together. You can ungroup it if you want, and if you want to work on them individually, or you can just keep it together if you want to move them as one single. Right now, it came in at the 000 point, and so it uses the Inventor origin and brings it in at that spot at the 000 point of 3ds Max. So it's actually going to be below our XY plane, I believe. So we're gonna actually move it up a little bit. So if you come up here to the top, you'll see the select and move tool along with the rotate and scale. We're gonna select and move. We're gonna go onto the Z axis and just move it up just ever so slightly. And as you can see, like I said earlier, it kind of moves it in the front view. Not so much the top view because we're still looking at it from the top, and then also the left view, we moved it up. Quick shortcut for you guys, for any time you guys are like zoomed in like this and you would just want to zoom to fit. In Inventor, it would be double clicking the mouse wheel, but in 3ds Max, it's going to be Control Alt and Z. So I'm going to be doing that a lot. If you see it zoom to fit, it's because I'm doing Control Alt and Z. All right. So yeah, again, to demonstrate, if I move this, it's going to move in the other views as well. Yeah, and so it's bringing in Inventor models is really as simple as just importing. Now it's just a matter of what you're going to do with that. So we're going to set up our virtual studio, is what I'm going to call it, virtual studio for our photos and our renderings now. I'm going to hide this, hide selections for the time being, and we're just going to zoom out a little bit.
And so what Daniel's talking about in regards to like a virtual studio, in a lot of product photography, for those of you who are not familiar, usually what gets set up is a large softbox. And what that is if you've ever seen, you know, those little like 3/4 boxes that are all white, but they're like kind of transparent on the sides, in which like the light enters through there. You can kind of simulate that in Max, which is what Daniel's going to be doing here by creating a box and then editing it. If you want some more details on what that actually looks like in real life, or I can definitely send that over if you can't get a visualization of that. We can even render it if you want.
Yeah, I mean, the reason for it is basically we want a very neutral backdrop, usually white, sometimes green. Like you guys have heard like green screens, things like that. Something where you can easily edit the backdrop if you want, like a single color that's not going to affect the image too much, while it will allow you to bounce light off of it and affect the CAD data and like the light that bounced onto that. And that's what we're looking for, that effect, that that lighting effect is what we're looking for. So we're just gonna start with a simple box. So if you go to the Create tab on your right-hand side, we're gonna select the box, and then we're gonna select one corner, and then we're gonna go to the other corner. And then once you let go, it's gonna select that's the XY plane of your box, or the length width. And then once you start dragging up, you get your height. We're gonna modify the height, width, and length manually later too. So don't worry too much about that. First, we're actually gonna move this to the 0, 0, 0 location. So if you guys select and move again, down here, you guys can actually input your coordinates that you want to move it to. So X, Y, and Z all set to 0. So now I know my box is centered about my origin. You can actually toggle this to be, instead of absolute coordinates, you can do relative. So you want to move it X distance or Y distance. You can select that if you want, but I actually do want the absolute coordinates. And then from here, we're going to modify the size. So if I select the Modify tab, I have these options here to change it. I'm going to make it really big, just so we know, right? So this is my box now, 400 by 400 by 400. And from here, we're going to modify it a little bit so that it looks more like our virtual studio. If you follow me to this box, we're going to actually right-click it, and we're going to convert this model to a poly. And so right now, it's just a solid, one single entity. The poly allows me to select the different aspects of this box. So like the edges, the faces, the vertices, or things like that. And so you'll kind of see here in my Modify tab, I have a editable poly modifier now. And so I'm actually going to select edge. So now anything I highlight, it won't let me highlight any box faces or corners, but it'll let me select the edges. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to rotate this by holding Alt and then the mouse wheel. I'm going to select this back edge as well as this other back edge, selecting both using Control. And from here, I'm going to chamfer these edges. Go to the chamfer settings down here in the Edit Edges panel, and you get this small little dialog. This is where I'm going to select the distance I'm going to chamfer. So I'm going to put 100 here. And so it's just a straight cut. At that point, this next tool is going to let me select how many different times it does it. So instead of 1, it'll do like a multiple of that. And so it'll give me more of a round edge, which is what I'm looking for here in this case. So you'll see it update now. So you see the preview there. And then once I hit this check mark, it's going to OK that. So now I get this nice little box with a few edges that are curved. I'm going to go back to my fit view, and then I'm going to select polygon at the top right. By selecting polygon, it allows me to select faces. No longer am I selecting for edges. And I'm going to select these I'm going to select these 3 boxes or polygons. I'm just going to delete them. By making it an editable poly, I'm able to modify it to the point of deleting different aspects of the polygon. So I'm just going to completely erase the face. Right now it looks black, but we're going to change that by editing the material of this box. So if I hit M on my keyboard, it'll bring up my material editor. This is the compact mode. If you prefer, you can play with the Slate material editor. This is like the full version. It's kind of like a tree. It uses like lines and things like that. I'm more comfortable with the compact mode. If you want to learn the other one, I can certainly guide you through it, but maybe a different video. This particular AV isn't for that. So I'm just going to go into here. This is the default, and right now it's just set to nothing. By selecting this assign material to selection, I'm going to allow this default material to be applied to this box. I'm actually going to name it to Virtual Studio. And now this box is going to have this Virtual Studio material. We can use the standard. This is a standard material. You can select from the standard different materials you want. You can actually get the Autodesk library built into this. If you would like that, if you prefer just using out of the box things. There are a few caveats to that, and I'll go over that a little bit later. But for now, I'm actually going to select the apologize. Bear with me here. I'm actually going to switch the render so that I have the option for Arnold objects. Yeah, the reason you're getting these messages is because the default materials are not supported by the render I just chose. And so, but now I should be able to select for Arnold materials, which is what I want. And I want this double-sided general material. I'm going to discard the old material. I just want the basic. So now I get a double-sided material. This is the facing material, so it's the outside, and then the back material, which is going to be over there. The ambient is going to be just like the base color. We're going to be messing with that. We're going to just get it to white. As white as we can. And then, sorry, I pressed cancel. Okay there. So now that's saved. Then we're gonna switch back to parent, and then we're also gonna do the same with the other side here.
And so essentially what you have there, because Daniel deleted those faces, is you have like a shell. If Daniel rotates this a little bit, which he can do after he gets out of this material selection, you'll see that since those faces were deleted, you do get a shell of what that is. Essentially, this is looking a lot more similar to what a boxed softbox looks like in real life, except the light is not coming from through the screens. Instead, it's going to be coming from another source, which Daniel's going to generate next here.
And so now that we've set up our virtual studio, minus the lights and the cameras, we can actually bring back our flywheel. So if you right click anywhere on the screen, you can actually unhide all, and it'll bring back that flywheel for us. Again, we made this box really big, and there's a reason for that. I'll show you that later. But it just so happens that this part is really small. And so we can actually just zoom in to the middle here, and we'll see it populate right here. Yep. And so, yeah, this is our flywheel in our environment. And this is exactly what we're looking for. The next step is going to be setting up a camera. And that's going to be done through the Create tab here. And then we're going to select the camera option. We're just going to stick with standard physical cameras. The cameras in 3ds Max are really great because they're supposed to imitate and give you the results of like real life cameras. So you'll see here, but I'm going to zoom out a little bit of this view. I'm going to add a physical camera, and I'm just going to start in the top view, just point it towards my object. You can kind of see what the camera is doing if you come to your perspective view and hit C. It's going to show you that camera view. Right now it's just flat on the ground, which is not what we want. We're just going to come to our front view and move it on up, and then you can rotate it in this plane, right? You can kind of come at it at different angles, however you need to, closer, further, higher. And that's one way to get your camera into your environment. There's actually another way to do it too. If I delete this, it's going to switch back to perspective view. And then basically what you can do is you can actually move your perspective view and get it to the spot you want it. And then you can hit Control C, and it'll make you a camera, a physical camera, the same one we made earlier in that view. So now we have a physical camera. Another reason I really like adding cameras is because if we switch back to perspective view and we were working in our environment and we're messing with the lights and different backgrounds and things like that, but we want to go back to our render. We want to go back to our object. We can just press C, and it'll take us right to it. It's kind of like our checkpoint, or like a, I don't know, constant, I guess, is what.
Exactly, yeah. So like if you, for people who are using Inventor, you know, design view representations bring you to an exact camera location. Essentially, it's doing the same thing.
Exactly. So yeah. Another reason why I like using cameras as opposed to going back to like your perspective view and adjusting it so that it looks the same again, rather just have a camera, go back to it, pressing C. if you have more than one camera, you can select between the cameras and things like that.
Yeah, and cameras, that's like another entire AVA, if not more, of data, right? So it's one thing to be able to place a camera. It's another thing to be able to select all of the different options you have, right? So in real life, if you're shooting a picture with your cell phone, you're generally using like automatic settings. Essentially, what Max allows you to do is to, shoot with general settings like it's letting Daniel do right now, but you can fully customize things like focal length, aperture, white balance, even for the lighting. Once you get further and further along, you can customize so much stuff in here. And that's something I'm actually really well versed at, just doing actual real life photography. If that's something people are interested in, to be able to like frame all of these pictures correctly, not necessarily correctly, but in the best way to be able to get the right perspective based on things like focal lengths and apertures, I can certainly help with that.
Yeah, so you can see when we go to the modify tab for the camera, you have all these options. You get like the lens length, the aperture is down here, you get zoom, you get field of view. All of that is available as an option to work with in 3ds Max. And so again, it's like trying to imitate real life cameras, real life images, and things like that. And basically that's going to allow us to move into lighting, which is also going to do the same thing. It's going to try to imitate real life and give us as realistic of a light as we can. So we're going to go back to the create tab. We're going to do a light. So we have a few options here. We got photometric, standard, and Arnold. Like Arnold says, Arnold lights are for Arnold render only. It's not going to be used. It's not going to be compatible with any of the other renders. Standard is it's the basic lights. It's not as photometric. Of course, it's not photometric. It's not the photometric option. But what I mean by that, it's not physical. It's not like it's not going to behave like a light would in real life. What it will do is it'll be an array, and it'll go in a direction, and it'll listen to that, but it won't decay as well. You have to put in a lot of options to do that. Whereas the photometric, it's going to behave more like real light, whether it's sunlight or free light. It's going to behave like that. So distance matters here. The intensity matters here, and the intensity is calculated in lumens or candelas, which are physical, actual units for measuring light. And so it's going to mimic that. And so we're actually going to use a photometric light because the renderer we want to use is going to be able to render that. And so we're going to use a target light similar to the camera. We're just going to select and then point, and we're going to drag it up in this front view. And that's all we need. Basically, we need the Virtual Studio box, the cameras, and then the lights, and then we're all good to go. And those are the 3 basic things you're going to need in order to render quickly and effectively. And the great thing is that you can actually, now that we have made it once, you can actually export it out as a 3ds Max file to be used later. And you have kind of like a template, quote unquote. And so if we actually were to do that, I can select these 4 things minus the flywheel. We don't want that as a template part. We're going to go to File, and then we're going to go to Save Selected. And then I'm going to hit merge. And so what this allows for me to do is merge is just another term in 3ds. So it allows me to differentiate between my actual scene files and then my merge files. Because later on, what you can do is after you import your CAD data, you can merge. It'll allow me to select which ones I want to bring in. So if I want to bring in just the box and I want to mess with the physical cameras and the lighting differently, I can do that. Or I can select both of them, or I can bring in all 3. And then if I hit OK, it'll merge it. It'll keep my CAD data. It'll bring in this environment data, and then it'll allow me to edit that for photo images. And so why don't I just quickly show you what I have so far, what this will look like. Again, we didn't mess with the material of this too much, so it probably won't look too good. And we actually didn't even set up this light to have different intensity, so it's probably not going to look too great, but we'll give it a try.
And the cool thing about Max is, right, you don't have to do a full-blown render of this whole thing. It allows you to do what's called drafts, and what that does is it allows you to get an assumption of what your thing is actually going to look like once you go through a full-blown render. as you can see.
Yeah, this is this actually happens because of the material that was brought in from Inventor by default. So it uses, so from Inventor we had the generic or the default material set to this flywheel, and the Arnold renderer actually can't render those materials. It's not set up to work with those. It's not compatible, so that's why we get nothing. And that's actually something we can work with by going to the materials again. So we're gonna select this cog or this flywheel, and then we're gonna assign this material to it. And then instead of standard, we're actually gonna use a physical material. Physical material can be used with the Arnold renderer. So we're gonna select, and there's a lot of presets here, and these are really cool. They give you like the general reflectivity and the shine and like the glossiness of like general materials. And so we're gonna select this brushed metal, and then we're gonna select the color. It'll be like a nice gray here. And so now that it's selected, you can actually tell the material has an object has a material assigned to it when you go to your material editor and you see these chamfered little boxes. That means it's used in your scene. If it's filled in, like you see on this flywheel material, that means that the current selection is using that material, whereas this virtual studio material is not selected, so it's just an empty chamfer. And that's just something to keep in mind. And so now if we hit render,
it'll start generating this actual file. Like Daniel mentioned, he didn't really mess with the lighting too much or the intensity and stuff. So we're just giving an example of what things actually look like if you don't mess with anything, like distances and lumen amounts and things like that. And so Daniel just changed the candela amount to 5500, Daniel, right?
Yeah.
And so what things like that allow you to do is to be able to change the intensity of the light, to change the amount of light that's hitting your particular object and things like that. So like in real life, the closer your light is, the more intense it's going to be on your object. Same thing with the camera. The closer you are to your actual object, changes the perspective view of your object, which is why you get these, which is why things look closer and further away from your subject based on how close the camera actually is. And those are just things we can go over, kind of like photo theory per se, in a further AVA in the future, if that's something you definitely want to go over.
Yeah, I'm not able to get the rendering, but luckily I have a saved environment.
There are a couple of questions that I'm seeing here. While Daniel's opening this file up again, I can answer a couple. Someone asked a question, what's the difference between ungroup and explode in 3ds Max? So there is that option when Daniel was like being able to ungroup all of the assembly essentially in that quote unquote tree on the left hand side. What explode does is it blows up everything. So every level of the model, so if you have multiple sub-assemblies and stuff, all of those get ungrouped. When you choose ungroup by itself, what that does is it only blows it up in that one level. So if you have multiple sub-assemblies, you only select one and ungroup it. It won't affect the other groups of files, whether they be you know, multiple parts to your assembly or things like multiple cameras and lights.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. I was able to open up the saved file I had yesterday, and so it's the same flywheel. I applied a material to it. As you can see, it gives you a really good like metal feel to it. There's like the little tiny bars on the flywheel, or the pivots, are reflecting light onto the flywheel itself, and it's giving me that reflection. But it's not clear because we know this is a metal material. It's not going to be like a mirror, so it's blurred out, and it's taking all of that into account. And this is the very basic settings of the Arnold renderer. This is very low quality, and you're going to see some graininess, and that's just the nature of the draft mode that we're in. To edit any of that, we can actually go up here to this render setup, the teacup with the cog flywheel on it, and then coming here, we have a few options. I'm going to go over these real quick. First, you can edit the output size. So if you want a larger image, you want like more pixels.
Or if you're printing on a billboard per se, or something
exactly.
like that.
You can actually come in here and edit that. You can manually input it. There's a few presets. So if you want like even 1080p, that's a preset for you. You can select that. It's a little bit too big for our demonstration. It'll probably take a while, but just so you know, it's available for you.
Yeah.
If you want your files to output and save every time you render, you can select that here. You can go to Files, put in the name of it, and then you can save files. Arnold Renderer, this is where you're going to find the options for quality. So this is preview. This is like kind of like a first pass render. It'll just do it quick. It's simple. The less it is, the less amount of times it does a quick pass or first pass. And then the camera A8 is where you're going to get most of your quality control. So super sampling just raises up a few notches, you get better quality. And so this is where you're going to mess with either the quality and like the draft and the time it takes for your renders to finish. And so unfortunately, the higher it goes, of course, it's going to take more time. So it's kind of a back and forth battle, compromising time and quality, balancing the two. Probably for draft, I would leave it at whatever the default is and just kind of see what it is. And then once you're figured out your environment, once you figured out the lighting, you can kind of set it back and set it up to like 10 or whatever you want it to be, so you get the really good quality images. Expect your computer to slow down significantly when you're rendering, especially at higher qualities. You might be able to work maybe, but it'll be really slow, significantly slowed, I would say.
Yeah, the bigger it is, obviously, the longer it's going to take and the more taxing it's going to be on the machines. But with the machines nowadays, it's definitely possible. Whereas something like this 10 years ago, with the amount of technology and stuff like that, definitely not capable. Daniel's actually on a desktop computer right now in this room, and the specs on that computer are pretty robust. I'd say, how much RAM does that machine have? Do you know?
This has 32.
Yeah, it's 32 gigabytes of RAM, so it's not like super crazy, but it is like a pretty good machine. And Daniel gets through these renders pretty quickly. But note, during those actual renders, it does tax on your computer. A question that comes up all the time is cloud. Daniel, do you want to explain cloud rendering capabilities, if any, in Max?
So it's definitely possible. I'm going to go ahead and show you the options you have there. Okay, switch. So instead of production rendering mode, you can actually submit your projects to the cloud and they will render it, and then you can go from there. There's also options to network render. What that means is you have like a rendering farm, and instead of just using one computer to render, you're using like multiple. You can actually set that up so that each computer is doing different parts of it. This is particularly useful if you're doing more than one image. And you would use more than one image if you're using like a video. So I think I saw a question about like IPNs and being able to render stuff like a IPN image exploding in like a inventor assembly in an IPN, doing like an explode in that timeline. There are ways to do that. It does take a little bit more time in 3ds Max, but it's definitely possible. And then you can even render out each individual frame at whatever quality you want. And then you can stitch those together in a post processor, and you get an AVI or a video file basically. And it's definitely possible. There's definitely limitless options with 3ds Max.
It's got advantages and disadvantages over Inventor. Obviously in Inventor, you can just hit the explode button, and then, or you can explode your particular assembly and then do an animation on that explode. It doesn't give you a lot of customization like we do have in Max in regards to what your background looks like, the lighting and the cameras and such. If you do need just a general whatever animation, you can just totally do it in Inventor. But if you're looking for that next level, you want to be able to put this, say, in your factory or something, you can use Max for those kinds of situations. Daniel was working on a project a couple of months ago for a customer using Max, where they were laying out their products in potential facilities to be able to propose to possible customers what their product's going to look like in the customer's actual space. And you know, the renders that Daniel and the rest of the team created helped them win a lot more business. They kind of attest to the fact that, you know, we generated these realistic, lifelike images of their products in a customer space to their success. And that's something we're really proud of here. We do a lot of stuff like that for people want to lay out, you know, their factories and have their products in there as well. So
yeah, and another thing about videos, I recommend, so there is an option to save to a video file straight from Max. So if you set up the frames within your environment and you're going from like 0 to, like, you can go from the entire time segment that you have set up, there is an option to save it to a video file directly from Max, but it's not recommended. And the reason for that, it's saving to one single file and anything can fail. If you think about a video image, they're actually just still images stitched together at X frames per second. So if you're doing like 20 frames per second, 24 frames per second, which is pretty standard, at like
5 seconds, that's 120 frames.
If that's 120 frames, that's 120 images. And if you're doing even 5 minutes at a draft mode of each image, that's 500 minutes. You're looking at plus. And so the render times for videos goes way up. And so if you're saving to a single file and at any point it fails, you're done. If you do single images and you're doing the entire time frame by frame, you can kind of just start over at the frame it messed up on. And that's why we recommend frame by frame as opposed to just saving to a single AVI file or a single MP3 file or whatever.
Exactly, and that's how Inventor does it in the background, right? So if you're looking at Inventor and you want to generate an animation, say for example for a simulation, which is one thing you can do in Inventor, what it does is it creates all of those frames. So you've got 50 of them. It's going to generate 50 individual frames and stitch it for you. So if it fails anywhere during that 50, if you actually look in the output file location, there will be like 45 images there because Inventor hasn't actually stitched those together yet. So that's just one thing to note.
I think I see a question here about does the rendering, can you render by farms? And again, I think you can. It's not going to be a box render pro series like you're asking, Mario. You can use the one that it comes with. It comes with Backburner, is the rendering network.
It's the engine that helps you.
Engine that you can set up in order to set up a render farm. But rendering farm capabilities are there.
Yep, there. And then there's a couple more questions. Can the settings be reused in another part? And yeah, they totally can be. Like Daniel did. Daniel actually took the lights and that box that he created, and he saved those as an individual Max file that you could bring into other Max files, right?
Yeah.
So you can totally take all of these settings over and move those into other things if you'd like to reuse those settings. And generally that's the case, right? You want the lighting to be consistent for all of your products. Say if they're going in a like a brochure or something, you kind of want your lighting to be consistent among all of your different product types. I know the same goes in play for actual physical product photography, just so you have like backgrounds and such that are consistent.
Question says, do you guys have any experience using FBX files from 3ds in Microsoft HoloLens? Unfortunately, we do not, but 3ds can export out to various different file types. And so definitely a lot of post-processing can happen with 3ds files. You can export it out as like PNG to be used with Photoshop. You can export it out as JPEG images, AVIs, videos, things like that. I do know that 3ds Max is used a lot for like virtual reality. I don't know how much the augmented reality.
Yeah, you can actually use it for HoloLens. Us personally, we haven't done it yet. There is an actual workflow for that. I know that's something one of our IT guys has looked into. Shout out to Eric Paul, who's probably listening right now. Autodesk is one of the partners for Microsoft in regards to HoloLens. Max happens to be one of those flagship products for HoloLens itself. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's an AR, augmented reality program that helps you. I don't know if you've watched like the Avengers movies and stuff when like Iron Man is like working on his table of awesomeness. That's kind of augmented reality. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of these other questions in regards to like you said, you when you make a movie in Max, you want to render all of the frames out and then combine them somewhere else. What product do you generally use for that, Daniel?
You can use iMovie. You can literally use any production, like movie software, video editing software. Because what you're doing is you're just basically getting PNGs or JPEGs. They're literally just image files. And so any software that can handle image files and put them in like a timeline is what you're going to be looking at for those videos. After Effects is great, or right?
Yeah, so After Effects is one of those big ones, and that's one of the Adobe products. You get it in like the Creative Cloud. That's generally like one of the workflows coming out of here, right? Is to put it in Creative Cloud, take into After Effects, combine all of the frames, and then put it into something like Premiere Pro to be able to edit that. I know a lot of people in the past have used things like Windows Movie Maker, which is like kind of a dead product now. Yeah,
even for post-production, cool thing you can do is instead of saving out with a background, you can save with, there's options to save without a background, and there's options where I can hide this background so it doesn't show in the actual render, so it's not visible to the camera.
But it is still reflecting off of it.
Yeah, but I still get the effects of it in my render, which is very cool. So that means I get just this flywheel, and I can put this into my Photoshop and put it into like a crazy image and like edit the effects, and it's easier to use that way. Options for you there. And so
exactly.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and like Daniel showed, like there are pretty much limitless options here in 3ds Max. For things like the camera settings and the lighting settings, we could go on for hours about stuff like that. If that's something you're really interested in regards to like actual theory behind why we selected what camera features we did, and what lighting options we selected, that's something we can totally go over. If you're really interested, that's actually something I'm really good at, just from a experience point of view, doing actual photography. So yeah, as far as quality in 3ds Max, Hollywood production companies use 3ds Max to be able to create their stuff.
Almost all game companies will use 3ds Max for their games. It's like they're using 3ds Max to come up with the environments for their games and the models and the people and things like that. So 3ds Max is a very powerful tool. It's literally the end result you can.
Yeah, you can go all the way down that road and start creating, you know, actual models in Max, and then doing full blown like movies or games. Or you can just put your product in there for one still image. You can take it as far as you want, really.
Yeah, and so some recommended next steps for you guys would be look into some post-production products. We mentioned a few. We don't want to like be biased or anything, but there are a few out there that can really take your renders to the next level in terms of post-production.
Yeah, but I use Adobe products.
Okay, there you go. And so you guys could definitely use those and really refine those images after you've rendered them out. There's also, I would recommend going deeper into the materials, because that's, I think, where you're going to get a lot of the different effects that you're going to want. Today we just used the presets, but within the presets there's so many different options you have, like the reflectivity,
the gloss,
the
metallic options in there too.
There's transparency.
Crazy.
You can make them self-illuminating. There's it's literally, I think a lot of the creative the intellectual property that comes from 3ds Max is found in the materials, and so that's where you're going to get, that's where you differentiate like the great 3ds artists to just like the casual ones. So if you're really interested in 3ds Max, I would look at a lot into the materials and lighting and things like that. So I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and so like we mentioned before, right? We have worked on a lot of projects with our customers using Max. We do have training for it. We have probably one of the best instructors on this coast, I'd say. You know, we've done a lot of projects for people. Like Daniel said, or like I said about Daniel, Daniel was working on a project where he was placing customers' products in prospective locations. We've done some stuff where we've done animations of like factory layouts and stuff, which is really, really crazy when you set up like, you know, your welding robots and how your conveyor belts work with your projects, and things like that. And that's, you know, that's kind of where you can go to be able to set yourself apart from the competition. If your deliverable before actually creating a physical product is more compelling than someone else's, right? That might be the difference in getting a job or not. And we've seen it happen. So it is something really cool to look into. I know a lot of people have, you know, have come from things like Showcase and stuff, and they have that stigma that Max is just like overboard, completely overkill for what they need. But really, it isn't, right? You can take Max to as simple as we did today, to as complex as actually creating like commercials and stuff out of it if you really wanted to. So yeah, definitely. Hopefully it gets everyone the ability to figure out how to start in Max, right? Because that's always the biggest hurdle is like, where do I want to start? There's like 50 different things I can do in here, actually more than that probably. And hopefully answer those questions. It looks like we did for Scott there.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys.
Yeah, so thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will see you all next week. Hopefully you all have a safe Halloween. Go Dodgers, I think is what we want to be speaking about. Hopefully there's no Astros fans in here. We'll get some games there. I know that pretty much everyone at KETIV is Dodgers fans, and that's why we have all
everyone is.
Yeah, there might be a few outliers, but
they're all Dodgers fans.
All right, then. Thanks, everybody, for joining us this week. If you missed any of today's webcast, you can definitely watch it after the fact. It is on our YouTube channel right now, right? There is a live stream going on right there as well. So you can definitely tune into there or give us a call. Reach out to us if you want more help getting started. We can certainly guide you in the right direction, send tutorials and stuff like that. So with that, again, happy Halloween, everybody. And we'll see you after the Dodgers win the World Series. All right, we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks.